Hey there guys, you're watching CodeLab. Welcome to the 6th and final video in the CSS Animation bite-sized tutorial, and in this video we're going to be using everything we learned throughout this series and applying it to a more practical use by turning a static website into a more dynamic one. Alright guys, so to our right here you can see in the browser we have our website that we're going to be working on throughout this tutorial. Now this website isn't the most attractive website in the world, but this is purely just to show you guys some of the practical things you can do with CSS animation and just hopefully inspire you guys to create cool animations for your own projects. Now of course you can also feel free to use the examples that you do see in this video. So in this website we have 3 examples where we've used the keyframes function as well as the animation property and the transform and the transition property coupled together to create these cool animations. So the first example is just a basic landing page that you see here, which has a background image, has some content in the center. So we've got a H1, a paragraph and an anchor tag which is styled as a button. Now the way this animation in a real world scenario would occur is when you enter the website, so the animation would take effect immediately. So if I refresh this, you can see at first everything isn't visible and then the text and the button appear from different directions to create a cool animation. So I'll just refresh that to show you guys again. So a pretty cool animation that we've used the keyframes function as well as the animation property to create. Now the second animation is going to be this card flip animation, which you've probably seen before, but the premise of this example is that you have a card which displays 2 sides. First initially displaying the front side, which you can see here in the browser, and then using the transform and the transition property as well as a hover effect, it rotates in a 3D motion and shows us the back facing side of the card, which is a pretty cool animation and is actually pretty simple to create. And then the last example is just going to be in this team section here, which again has a transform and transition properties effect to it as well as a hover effect, and when you hover over each individual you see they scale up in size, which is a pretty simple effect, but again makes the website a bit more dynamic and brings it a bit more to life and just looks a lot better in my opinion. So with that all out of the way now, we can get started. So to our left here you can see we are inside another folder in VS Code called Practical Example, Example 2, and this has 2 files of index.html and style.css as well as having the image folder which houses our image that we're going to be using throughout this tutorial. Now the first bit we're going to be working on, as you can see here, is just the header section. So this is just really simple. It's a header semantic tag with a class of header, and this houses the H1 paragraph and the anchor tag, which we're going to be styling as a button. And what we're going to do first is just open this up with live server. So this is what it currently looks like. Now I've also linked the style sheet up here, so we'll head inside the style sheet and you can see we've just got some global styles already, so no margin or padding, and the box sizing property is set to border box, and the text decoration is done, so it removes the underline of the anchor tag. So the first thing we want to do here is grab the class of header, and I want to make the height of the header to be 100 viewport heights because we want it to span across the whole width of the browser here vertically. And then I want to grab the display of flex because we're going to be using flexbox to position our content to the center. And currently right now by default they're stacking up next to each other in a row. We want them to stack on top of each other in a column, and let's just make the text align to the center, and then using the alignment properties of justify content and align items to the center. This now positions our content to the center of the browser here. So all we need to do from here is just add the background image. So background URL single quote marks image folder, enter the image folder with /, enter image 1, and then from here we just need a few more properties. So it's repeating itself, we don't want it to repeat, and then we want this to align to the center on the X and Y axes, and then we also want this to cover the whole browser here, so we use the cover value. And then we're pretty much done with the header styling here. I just want to make the color of the text white, and then all we need to do from here is just style the content. So we'll grab the H1 first, so header, enter the header and grab the H1, and we want the font size of this to be let's say 60 pixels, so nice and big. And then let's also add a bit of margin between this and the paragraph, so let's say about 20 pixels. And then we'll grab the header paragraph next, and let's also make the font size of this a bit bigger, so we'll say about 25 pixels. And then let's push the button and the paragraph away from each other slightly, so we'll use margin bottom here and say 25 pixels for that. And then lastly we just need to style the anchor tag here so it looks more like a button, so we're going to grab the header class again and this has a class of btn. And then what I want to do first is just change the color of this to white, give it a border, so we're going to say solid, let's give it a border of 3 pixels, and then let's also make this white. And then let's just give it a bit of breather room between the content and the border, so we use padding, and let's give it a let's say 15 pixels. So nice and spacious. Increase the font size a little bit too, so font size, let's say 25 pixels. And then let's just change the border radius so it's more rounded, and we'll say border radius, let's give it a value of 30 pixels. So it looks a lot neater now, and looks pretty much the exact same as the original. So you can see actually the button's a bit bigger than the original, but it's not too important. So that's pretty much it for the styling for this. All we need to do now is add the keyframes and the animation property. So let's first create the keyframe for the heading. So we're just going to go underneath the class of header h1, and we're just going to grab the keyframes function, and we're going to call this function move in left. And we're going to be using percentages inside of here because we want 3 reference points, which I'll explain in a moment. So opacity, we want this to start at 0 because we don't want it to first appear. And then we're going to apply a transform translate x because we want to move this on the x-axis. And we want this to start animating from the left, so we'll use negatives here. So we'll say negative 100 pixels. And then the second reference point is going to be at 80%. And the reason I'm doing this is because if we look at the original example for both the heading and the paragraph, they don't actually stop at 0 pixels. They actually push a little bit and then bounce back to 0 pixels. So if I refresh the original, you can see they actually push off a little bit and then bounce back to the center. So we need 3 reference points for that. So at 80%, we want the opacity to be 1, and then on the x-axis, so transform translate x, we want it to push 20 pixels. And then at 100%, we then want it to stop at the 0 pixels, so opacity 1, and then transform translate x 0 pixels, so that will put it to the center. So all we need to do from here is just link this keyframe with a heading. So we use that with the animation property, and then we have called it move in left, and let's just make the animation about 3 seconds long. And as you can see now, the H1 comes in from the left and then pushes slightly off and then comes to the center. So you see it pushes slightly and then moves back to the center, which is exactly what we want. Now for the paragraph, this is really simple. We pretty much just copy and paste this keyframe, go underneath the paragraph here, and then instead of moving left, we'll do move in right. And then we want this to be the exact opposite. So we want it to start at 100 pixels on the x-axis, so it'll push it to the right, and then when we get to 80%, we want it to be negative 20 pixels, so it pushes it slightly 20 pixels to the left, so it has that bouncy look, and then it will just bounce back to the center. So all we need to do is go inside the paragraph, grab the animation property, and then say move in right. And let's also make this 3 seconds long. And then as you can see in the browser now, the paragraph is coming in from the right, bounces slightly to the left here, and then bounces back to the center, as well as the H1 doing the same thing. So we're pretty much nearly done with the animation now. All we need to do is just again copy and paste this for the button, and then we'll say move up. And we don't actually need 3 reference points here. We can actually use the from and to. So from let's say 30 pixels down on the y-axis, not the x-axis, and then at 2 the starting point, which would just be its original starting point of 0 pixels. So it'll be about 30 pixels down on the x-axis, and then it'll push back up, and then all we need to do is just include this animation to the button. So it's got the name of move up, and let's also make this 3 seconds long. And now the button should start 30 pixels down and then animate upwards. So if we refresh this now, it should animate the H1 coming in from the left, the paragraph coming in from the right, and the button coming in 30 pixels from its original position. So as you can see now, it's got the exact same animation as our original example here. So coming in from the left, coming in from the right, and the button comes in from the bottom here. So that's pretty much it for the animation. All I want to do now is actually just add a bit of styling to the button after the animation is completed. So when I hover over this, it'll push up slightly, and then when I use the active state, it'll push back down, just to give it a more dynamic look. So this is going to be really simple. Just going to go underneath the button here, and we'll grab the header, btn, and then grab the hover class, and then we want this to be, let's grab the transform property, and let's just translate this on the y-axis by about -3 pixels. So when we hover over this, after the animation is complete, you'll see the button now pushes up by 3 pixels, and then we want it to push back down, so we'll use the active pseudo class. So we'll grab the same thing here, and then instead of the hover, we'll say active, and then we'll just say -1 pixels. And then after the animation is complete, when you hover over the button, it pushes up, and then if we click on it, so it's activated, it'll push back down, so giving it the impression that it's being clicked. So just much more dynamic, pretty simple effect, but in my opinion just looks a lot better than just having a static button. So the next section we're going to be building now, or the next animation, is going to be the card flip animation. So the premise again of this animation is that it shows the front facing card, and then when we hover over this, it will rotate and show us the back facing part of the card. So a pretty cool animation and pretty simple to create. So the first thing we need to do is just go underneath the header section, as let's create the markup. So I'm going to put in here card flip animation, and then first I just want to create a section and give it the ID of card flip, and then also insert a h1 here with the class of section title. This isn't too important, but I'm just going to do this for consistency, and I'm just going to name here the card flip title that you see here. And then underneath this, we're going to create the 4 layers of our markup for the card that we need. So the first layer is just going to be the flex container, and this is simply just going to house the cards and center all our content. And then inside here, we're going to have the class of the card container. So this is going to contain the card as well as containing the front and the back side of the card. So inside the card container, we're going to have the actual card. Don't be confused by the way I'm laying this all out. It will make more sense in a moment, but this class here is actually going to be the moving part, and we're going to apply the hover effect on the card container. And the reason I'm doing this is because if we apply the hover effect on the card, it displays weird behavior, which I'll show you guys in a moment, which will make more sense. But just for now, we're just going to create the layers, and then inside the card here we'll have the front part of the card, and then duplicate this, and then we'll have a back, and I'm just going to put a paragraph in here saying front, and then a paragraph in here saying back, and that's all we need for the markup for this section now. So let's go inside and style things now. So the first thing I want to do actually is style the class or the heading, which has the class of section title here, because we're going to be using it again for the team section. So we'll go above everything and go underneath the asterisk here and grab that class of section title. And the first thing I want to do is just increase the font size to about, let's say 60 pixels, and then let's also give this a width of 50%. Let's text align this to the center, and then this also, the original I think has a border bottom. Yep, so it's going to have this border bottom here, so let's include that border bottom, and let's say about 5 pixels, and let's make it solid and black. And then let's also change the color of this text to be black too. Oh, sorry, black. And then let's just see what that looks like if we save this. So scroll down, you can see it there. So what we need to do now is just center this. So we're going to use margin. So margin, let's have about 20 pixels on the top. Let's have auto on the left and right so it centers, and then let's have about 50 pixels for the bottom. So I think that should do for the styling for that one. So yeah, you can see here now it's pretty much the same as the original here. I think that's actually got some padding too, so let's just add some padding here, about 50 pixels. Save that, and now it looks pretty much exactly the same as the original here. So that's it for the section title. We can now use this class again for the team section. So for the card flip animation, the first thing I want to do is just make this the same height as the landing page. So we're going to grab the ID of card flip and give this a height of 100 viewport heights, and then we'll grab the flex container class, and let's just center our content. So display flex, justify content to the center, align items to the center, and save that, and that should center our content there. And then let's also actually give this a height of, let's say, 50 VH. So that should center our content here. So all we need to do now is just create the card. So the first thing we need to do is grab the class of card container, and we're going to give this a height of, let's say, 450 pixels, a width of 250 pixels. So that's the height and width of our cards here. Now the next thing I want to do is go underneath here and grab the card container. Oh, sorry, no. The next thing I want to do now is grab the actual card. So this has a class of the card, and let's give this a width of 100% and then a height of 100% also. And then let's also give this a position of relative, because we want to position the two sections of the front and the back absolute inside of the card. So that's why we're positioning this relative. And then the next thing I want to do here is just grab the front and grab the back, and let's also make sure the width of this is 100% of the container, the height of this is 100% of the container. Let's also give it some box shadow. So let's say 0 on the X and Y, but let's just give it a bit of blur, so 5 pixels. So now the shadow will appear all the way around the boxes. So we'll just save this and see what it looks like. So there's our card right there, so the front and the back. So what we need to do is just position this absolute now, so they stack on top of each other. So we'll say position absolute, and what that'll do now is just place them in the center here. So you can see we've got the front and the back of the card at the moment. And let's also add a bit of border radius to this. Border radius of about let's say 10 pixels, so the card is more rounded, so it looks a lot more like the originals that you see here. So all we need to do now is apply a combination of the transform and the transition properties to create those effects. So the first thing we need to do is just make sure the back of the card isn't displaying anymore. So we're just going to grab that class, and what I'm going to do is just apply a transform here of rotate on the y-axis of 180 degrees. Now what this will do is actually show us the mirror image. So what we're seeing right now is the back of the card, if that made sense. So that's why it's flipped to the other side here. So to hide this, we need the other property of the back face visibility and set that value to hidden. So we're applying it here, and we're just going to say back face visibility to hidden. So basically this does exactly what it says on the tin. When we've rotated this, we're seeing the mirror image or the back face, and we want this to be hidden. So if I refresh this now, we'll no longer be able to see the back of the card. We can't see the front because we've rotated it, and then we can't see the mirror image because we've hidden it here. So that's what these two properties combined together do. So the next thing we need to do now is just apply a transform style of preserve 3D to the actual card class. I will explain why I've done that in a moment, but what I want to do is just get this whole thing rotating. So to do that, we're going to need the hover class. Now the reason I laid the markup the way I did was because if I apply the hover class to the card class here, actually I'm just going to show you guys what happens if I do apply it to the card. So grab the card, apply the hover class, and say transform rotate Y 180 degrees so we can see the back or the back facing card, and just apply transition here so it's nice and smooth. So to the transform of 0.5 seconds. Now let's just save this and let's see what happens. So I'll go and hover over the card. You can see it is effectively working, but it's really laggy and actually just displays really weird behavior and just nowhere near smooth as the original example. And the reason this is happening is because we're applying the hover to the card which is rotating, and because it's rotating here on the y-axis, the width actually becomes compromised and leads to this laggy behavior. If we apply the hover class to the actual card container, you can see this actually has a fixed width which never changes, so it never gets compromised, and that's what will make the animation smooth. So if I just delete this and go underneath the card container here, I'm just going to grab the transition and apply it to the card container. So we'll grab the card container here and then apply hover class to this for the class of the card, and then we apply the transform of rotate on the y-axis 180 degrees, and then let's just save this. And then if we scroll down and if we hover over this now, you can see it's just so much more smoother. There's no lagginess or weird behavior, and that's because again the width of the card container is fixed, so it's never rotating, so it's never compromised. Whereas if we apply it, as we just seen, to the card, the width actually gets compromised while it's rotating. So that's why I laid it out the way I did. Now back to the importance of this preserve 3D. So all I want to show you guys, if I actually comment this out and then I'll save this. Now if I hover over the card, you'll see that we're seeing the mirror image of the card. So essentially what Preserve 3D does is exactly what it says on the tin. It preserves the 3D rotation effect. Without it, we're essentially just seeing the 2D rotation of the front of the card, resulting in us seeing the mirror image right now that you see in the browser. So that's really the importance of the Preserve 3D. So I'll just revert that back. So now we can see the back of the card. Now to give it that real 3D effect, all we need to do now is just apply a perspective class to the card container. So just grab the property of perspective and let's say about 1000 pixels, and then let's save this and then scroll down. You'll see now it has that 3D effect. I'll actually just slow it down a bit just so you guys can really see the 3D motion. So we'll scroll down. You can see now when we hover over this, it really creates that 3D effect with a perspective of 1000 pixels. So that's how we can create the card flip animation. And if you guys want to apply more cards, all we need to do really is just go to the index.html and just pretty much duplicate this 2 more times. Save this so you can now see 3. And then instead of having the flex container class as justify content to the center, let's just put a bit of space between them or around them, however you guys want to do this. Save this. So you can see now we pretty much have the exact same styling as the original. So pretty cool animation and pretty simple to create. So the last animation, guys, is just going to be for our team section here that you can see in the original example. So in this you can see it's got the same section title as the card flip animation. So all we need to do is just apply the section and title class to this. And in this section you can see here we've got 3 different individuals representing the team for our website. And then when you hover over each one of these individuals, you see they scale up in size just to give them a bit more emphasis. So what's in play here is just the transform and the transition property, and just adds a bit more of a dynamic look to this section, which I think is simple but I think pretty effective. So the first thing we're going to do is just create the markup for this section. So going to be pretty simple. What I'm going to do here is just put a section or a comment, sorry, for team, and I'm going to grab a section tag and I'm just going to say, I'll give it an ID of team, and the first thing I want to put in here is the h1, and then just give it the class of section title so it has the same styling, and then we're just going to put team as the content. So if we save this and go back to the original, you can see the title of the section here, which is the exact same as the card flip animation. So underneath this, all we need to do is just create another flex container class. I'm going to call this flex container 2, and inside this we're just going to have 3 divs, and they're going to have a class of flex items. Hit tab, and inside each of these divs we're just going to have the image first, and the first person is going to be IMG and it's going to be Chris, and then underneath the image we're just going to have a H2, so it's going to be for their name, so Chris Green, and then the last thing is just a paragraph representing what they are in the company or their position in the company. So all we need to do from here is just duplicate this 2 more times, save this. If I scroll down, you can see the images are way too big, so I'm going to go inside the style sheet now and immediately correct that. So we're just going to put a comment here, team section styling, and the first thing I want to do is just grab the ID of team and then grab the images, and I'm just going to give them a width of 150 pixels and a height of 300 pixels. And let's just save that, so they're nice and small now. Oh, we just need to change the images to here. So let's change from Chris to Jen, and change the name for Jen. So Jen Warren, and she is the president of the company. And then for the last one, it's going to be Jack, and Jack Smith for his name, and he's just going to be the CFO. And you guys can use any images you like and names you like. It's just going to be for this example. And if I refresh this, we're going to get our images. Now we'll go back inside the style sheet, and the next thing I want to do here is just make the border radius section here about 50%, because I want them to be more rounded instead of this square shape that we're getting. So I'll save that, and you see now they're more rounded. And just to preserve their aspect ratio, we're going to use the object fit to a value of cover. And if I save that, you can see now they have a much more finer cut to them, and they look a lot nicer. Now also want to just grab the team ID again, and just make sure the width of this is 100% of the container. And then the background color, I want this to be a lighter gray, because I want it to be a different color to the card flip animation section. And then let's just also give this a height of 80 VH. So let's save that. So you see now it's got the same background, so it's just a bit different to the card flip animation section. So from here, just a few more things. So we need to grab the flex container class, or the second one, and then obviously display this as flex, justify content to space around, and then let's just align the items to the center here, and then let's also just give them a height of about 50 viewport heights, and we'll save this. And you can see now it looks a lot more like the original, so we're nearly there. So we're just going to grab the flex items class, which is the class here that wraps around the images, the H2 and the paragraph. So just going to say text align to the center, and then a transition property here, say this is going to be for the transform, and say 0.3 seconds, and let's just make it ease. And then all we need to do now is just apply the hover class, so flex items hover, and then we'll grab the transform scale property or method, and we'll say 1.1, and we'll save this. And then if I hover over these now, you can see now they scale up in size, emphasizing the individual, and just adds a much more dynamic look to this section. Again, a simple but effective technique in my opinion. So that will conclude the video, guys, and also conclude this bite-sized series. I really hope you enjoyed the videos, and I hope you learned a lot throughout this series. CSS animations are really awesome, and you can actually get really creative with them and help bring your websites to life. And as always, if you like the content, please hit the like button, and please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.